Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been gifted. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words HeartLand Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. Secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so by giving us a call on your Needle app. If you have the Needle app, you can tap the phone icon and talk to us directly, or you can send us a comment through the Needle app. It's NEDL. You can find it in your app store, download it, open it up, log in, and it'll give you the option to type a comment to us or tap the phone icon and talk to us voice to voice. Or you can send me an email. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeanie at jeae at again.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a comment or a question from you through an email, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service. And that's just so much easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. And as always, we value input from people. Um, we had some people contributing yesterday in input and people having some strong response to that input. And so today I've made notes into, you know, preparation for what we might do today. And that yesterday, and the topic was um, one that several people use to generate upset. And so I wanted to talk about what what the core of our teaching here is related to upset. And there are a number of things that came to me to share. One of them has to do with the way of mastery in the third lesson. It speaks very directly about how any time that I have reactivity, some kind of ultra high positive or negative reactivity. It indicates my need for me to go inside myself and dismantle that content in my mind, that false content. And I'm having some technical difficulties that I have to beg your account, your patience in as I try to find this. So there are places within the way of mastery in the third lesson. There's one on the 8th page where they use the word reactivity, but then in the third lesson on page 24 or I'm sorry, 42, and then again 48, it talks directly about the uh, the difficulty. There's actually a heading on page 35 titled Reactivity Indicates the Need for Self-Forgiveness. And in that work in the third lesson, they're very clear about how forgiveness, in their word, is exactly like what Dr. Michael Ryce talks about. It is a, a process that I use to go inside myself and remove judgments and remove negative thoughts. The actual from the third lesson is to forgive means to choose to release another from the perceptions you have been projecting upon them. It is therefore an act of forgiving, in other words, removing your own projections. As you begin to remove those projections, judgments, and perceptions, even 70 times, 7 times, each time you forgive, you take yourself deeper into the purity of your own consciousness. And you begin to see how profoundly you have been coloring and therefore affecting all of your relationships. How have you done that? Through the simple act of not being aware of the power of projection. Right? Earlier in that lesson, he says, I began to realize that the greatest gift I could ever receive could only come to me with perception that I might conjure up about you, my brother or sister, because when I create a judgment or a perception, it hides the capital T truth that is true about you always. And so, you know, this leads right into the idea that, as I tried to mention at the end of the show yesterday, if you were listening in any part of that show, whether we're talking about one group of people versus another group of people, or you're watching people making comments on the app, and you generate any kind of an upset, please use the tools. The actual foundation of this work is the recognition that I'm the one that creates every emotion I experience. So if I'm generating a level of anger or sadness or hurt or frustration, the first order of business in this work is that I take a calming breath and turn the focus inside myself and use tools to dismantle the upset I'm creating. Because every time I create any kind of hostility or fear, it provides a powerful distorting factor for my perception. And if I want to perceive clearly, I need to remove the hostility or fear or see the false nature of whatever process I've put into place within my own mind before I decide to speak or act from that position. Another thought that I had is to talk about how deeply we distort our perception every time we throw a name at someone or any kind of a label. And every time I name somebody as a label, that person is just a blank. That person's an idiot. That person comes from this part of the country or this religion, and so they are this or they are that. Whether I realize it or not in that moment, what I'm doing is an act of dehumanizing the other person. And in order for me to justify the negativity or the negative action that's, you know, being suggested by my mind when I'm in a space of rage, in order for me to justify that, I have to be able to think, well, I'm not really doing this to another human being. I'm not doing this to another being of brilliance and light. I'm doing this to a blankety blank. I'm just doing this because they deserve this. And the whole process of labeling anyone or anything is like taking a snapshot picture of somebody in the middle of whatever they're doing and then saying this is that person. The whole of this person, you can learn everything you need to know from this person from this picture. That's never been true and it will never be true. And so, you know, one of the points I wanted to make is that anytime we name call anybody, when we call somebody an idiot, I remember years ago on this internet show that came up, and I was led to say there are no idiots. There are only beings of brilliance and light who have either temporarily forgotten or yet to discover their brilliance. At the same time, that's absolutely true. Every one of us, past a certain age, I'd say maybe, 18 years of age, every one of us has done things that we look back on and say, well, that was idiotic. But because we did that action, it doesn't mean that's all we are or that is what we are. So the whole thing about judgment in this work, whether it's as clearly stated in Dr. Michael Ryce's work or not, it's right there in the Kabbalic manuscript and the Course in Miracles and the Way of Mastery. This process of perception is one of distortion. This process of judgment puts the distortion of, through our perception into high gear. It puts it on steroids. So the most important thing we can do whenever we have engaged in some work like this and we're able to tune into the earliest warning signs of any kind of upset from within ourselves, the most important thing we can do is take that calming breath and turn the focus inside and start asking ourselves, how are we creating this upset? And most of the time when I'm presenting this to people in my life, they don't want to hear about dismantling their upset before proceeding with a conversation. And unless we can dismantle our upset before we proceed into conversation or action, we doom ourselves to repeat the conflict, pain, and suffering of our bloodlines and of all humanity. If we can't wake up and do something differently than has been done before, we're only going to get the same kind of reactions we've always gotten, or other people like us have always gotten throughout history. You can't have a war unless you first dehumanize whoever you're going to go to war with. And that insight leads to the invitation in this work, which is at the earliest indication of upset. I turn the focus inside myself and work to remove whatever it is in my thoughts and beliefs that's less than love. And I can use Guy Finley's words. He says we must actively steal from ourselves every inclination to be negative, every reason to be angry, bitter, hurtful, negative in any way. Because if we don't actively work to steal those reasons and excuses from ourselves, then we will be able to justify any level of abuse. And as I said, most of the time when I'm trying to talk to people about this, they they don't want to hear it. They don't want to take responsibility. They don't want to turn the focus inside. And their mind is telling them that they're upset because of someone or something outside of them. And it's just like being on a treadmill. Doesn't matter how fast you run on a treadmill, you never go anyplace. So one of the solutions that I offer for people is to think in terms of content versus process in a conversation. And the content is what I define as the facts and the logistics and who said what and who did what and when did this happen and what's the history of this. That's all content. Whether it's the specifics about what happened or its interpretations about what happened, that's content. The process is a word that I use to refer to the internal emotional process that I might be having or somebody else might be going through as we're in the middle of trying to hold a conversation. And one of the more powerful ways I've used these several factors together is to train myself to study, to really, really observe closely day in and day out. Mindfulness, you might call it, you can call it whatever you want. But at the earliest warning sign of upset in my system, I call a timeout and I turn the focus inside myself and I refuse to talk about the content until after I've identified and dismantled the emotional process that's less than love. This is a tool that, or the combination of a use of several tools that has led to tremendous benefit in my life in a number of different areas. And I've given examples of it before. I think I've talked before about the book or the audio file titled The Art of Nonviolent Communication by Micah Salaberios, Micah Salaberios. And in it, near the end, he gives an example of his trying to talk to his mother, and his mother gets triggered to upset. And he knows about the art of nonviolent communication, and he knows the benefit of doing what in that work they call emergency empathy. And he talks about how when he was in the middle of it, he had the thought and he said, I don't want to do that with her. I'm angry at her. She's doing this, this, and this, and this. But eventually, he fought through it. He got himself to turn inside and slow down his own upset and and step into the use of the tool of emergency empathy. And everything changed because instead of just focusing on the content, he focused on the process. And he said to his mom, it seems like you're upset with this flavor of emotion. Could it be because of this, this, or this? And he let his mom give him feedback and tell him how wrong he was. And then he listened. And then he talked again about her emotional process, just trying to understand what she found so upsetting or what she was using within her own thought process to generate such intense negative emotional states. And so then she responded and he listened again and fed back again. Eventually, when he was able to define for her, repeat back to her what it was in her mind that was generating so much negative emotional process, then the negative intensity diffused itself and they were able to connect and then go back to talking about the content and all kinds of other things in a harmonious way. But whenever I'm thinking in my mind, why that's so and so, or when a swear word comes to my mind or a label on somebody comes to my mind, I can instantly know three things. This, whatever I'm thinking right now, is not completely true. It's at least partially false. It may be completely off the mark. The second thing I can know is this is an old tape playing. I'm not really upset about what's going on in this moment. And if I'm willing to turn the focus inside, calm down, and ask myself, how am I creating this upset or what am I making this situation mean? I'll be able to see and then dismantle whatever's less than love in my thought process before I go back and try and talk to the other person about the logistics or the details or what I call the content of the conversation. And that kind of thing is never out of place. It's always beneficial to use a process like that. And the only time I can, as soon as I say that, I say, oh, there's always an exception. Okay, so if you're in the middle of a physically life-threatening situation, yes, take an action and get people safe. But as in any other situation where you're just thinking about something and you're generating upset, it is not of benefit to keep the process going until after you've dismantled the upset. The process could be the conversation. In this case, I'm talking about the process of your emotional upset, and we can't ever reach good, productive conclusions to something when people are triggered to an intense emotional response. How can you know you're triggered to intense emotional response? You think somebody else is an idiot, that's a label. You're calling them a jerk, that's a label. You're calling them, some derogatory name from the political realm or from the personal realm, or you're calling them a name based on where they come from or what their ancestry was. I can instantly know if I'm doing that, I'm not seeing things clearly, that I'm coming from an upset place, that my emotional process is distorting my perception. I can also know if I listen to my tone of voice and my volume. And that's what they're talking about in the way of mastery, where the heading of this topic in lesson 3. The section is, it talks about the veil of projection, and then it talks about how awakening requires vigilance and discipline. And then it says that reactivity indicates the need for applying the process of forgiveness or dismantling my judgments and perceptions inside myself. That particular section reads, rest assured, you will continue to project upon others whatever remains unhealed and unforgiven within yourself. Each time you react to another, and this means negatively, react to another, you're being given a sign that there is some kind of an energy that has been presented to your awareness that you have not dismantled within yourself. It's a negative energy that you're pouring your mind energy into, a negative belief about self, a negative judgment about self that's become activated in your mind, and your mind is flipping it around and distorting it to make you think that it's about somebody else, that it's coming from outside of you. Reactivity indicates the need for self-forgiveness. Not just sometimes, always. I can't ever experience negativity inside of myself that isn't about me. And we talk about this over and over again. We talk about the benefit of doing the worksheets when I'm upset. And I have for decades now talked to people about this and handled their objections because they say over and over again, I wouldn't have this thought and this negative emotion if this person hadn't done X, Y, or Z thing. And I say, okay, you can have that thought in your head, but that's not how the system works. And I've done this work on myself enough times to realize that if my mind is serving up a series of thoughts that leads me to believe I'm only angry because this person lied to me, if I do enough worksheets and or targeted journaling that Michael Ryce calls the mind shifter, if I stir up enough of what's going on inside of me, I will find, and this has worked its way into the bottom line observations, I will find that there's a place inside me where I'm still judging myself negatively for doing the same or similar thing that my mind wants me to believe I'm angry at this person for doing. It's always an inside job. And if I do enough worksheets on it and I uncover the part of my mind that's still judging myself so negatively for this, and then I do enough worksheets on my negative judgment of myself from that earlier time in my life, whether it was 2 weeks ago or 25 years ago, I'm going to reach the place where I have compassion for my younger self, where I understand that the negative judgment and the beating myself up for this is something that's taken out of context and it's fueled by the traumas of my generations, and it is not the truth, capital T truth about me. And I will open up that, you could call it a pathway, a keyway within me to feel compassion for my younger self, that very same self and that very same action that minutes before I thought I was feeling horrible shame about or judgment, negative judgment about. And when I do that effectively, thoroughly, I will step into the feeling of compassion for the other person. And then when I take a breath and clear my mind and think about the present moment situation that minutes before I thought was causing my upset, and I look at the person that I thought was doing the thing that was causing my upset, I'll see that, oh, they must be going through the same kind of intense, painful, sad, or fearful things like I was going through years earlier when I did this, and I'll have compassion for them. And the upset that I was generating moments before will not be part of the distortion of my perception. So it doesn't matter what my mind tells me the source of my upset is. Course in Miracles has a line where it says, I'm never upset for the reason I think I am. And even before the Course in Miracles came up with that, that ancient truth had worked its way onto the 10 bottom line observations. So we're calling people to stay directly connected to their own earliest warning signs for upset and to choose to develop within themselves a response to that upset that's different than what they've done their entire life long, that's different than what their culture or their family has taught them to do, which is what Michael Ryce calls become a card carrying member of the one world universal religion of blame. This work, the invitation is spend a little bit more of your mind energy every day tuned into where you carry the earliest warning signs of any upset. And as soon as your alarm goes off that there's some kind of an upset in you, take a calming breath. Bring the focus of your attention from the outside back into yourself and start asking questions like, how am I creating this upset? And or, what am I making this current situation mean? What meaning am I throwing onto this neutral set of events? And or how is this related to negative emotions and negative judgments of myself that I've downloaded from maybe days, weeks, months, years, or decades in the past? And if we can do that more consistently and persistently, we will be able to diffuse our own participation in any negative interaction. So there's a number of different factors at work here. The first one is this recognition that I will only ever feel emotions that I create inside me, and that those emotions are created through this process of when I choose an interpretation and place it on what I think is happening based on what my five senses are telling me. That's the creative force that constructs my experience of life in that moment. The next thing is if I'm recognizing that I'm the one who's got a tightness or a tension or an upset, a pain, fear, or sadness in me, and I'm willing to take a calming breath and turn the focus inside, I can start to discover and perhaps even apply tools like the EFT tapping or the Michael Ryce Reality Management Worksheet or the simple goal cancellation that we have on the mental short version of the Reality Management Worksheet. And I can interrupt the process within me that's creating the negative emotional state. As that happens, I start to restore something closer to accurate perception. The next thing is I can start monitoring myself for the earliest warnings of upset and recognize that whether I'm feeling upset from the other person or I'm feeling the upset within me, the best thing for me to do at that point is quit talking about the content and either talk about my own upset and ask for support in dismantling my own upset or taking the time out to back away from the conversation and use tools to dismantle my negative emotional state, or for me to point out that the other person, at least in my perception, is having an experience that's emotionally intense or negative, and to offer to support them in exploring that and dismantling it. What might that look like? Well, one of the examples that was so powerful and clear and prominent happened, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago. I forget how many, but it was in a family gathering, and my mother was still alive, and she's the matriarch of the family. And my brother and sister-in-law had come down from Minnesota, and my other sister and I, and my brother and sister-in-law and my mother were sitting around the kitchen table playing a game of dominoes. And because the dominoes doesn't really require a lot of high level thinking, I decided at a lull in the conversation that I would talk a little bit about Dr. John Sarno. And this is at the time when the documentary about his life had been released. And so I talked about Dr. Sarno and the work he did and how beneficial it is and his concept of tension myoneural syndrome and how mental emotional tension held in our tissues when it gets activated can cause muscles to contract, and if they contract and cut off blood flow to tissue as little as 10%, it can cause excruciating pain. And I talked about the young documentary filmmaking team that decided to go back to their project and get it completed. And they finally did that and they got it completed and they got it published before Dr. Sarno died so that he could enjoy it. And as I said before he died earlier that year, my brother erupted in upset. And his tone of voice was loud and harsh, and he said, "What are you talking about? He's dead. What are you telling us all this for if the guy is dead? What kind of nonsense is it?" He just kept going. And I turned, because he was sitting directly to my right. I turned and looked at him and said, "Tom, you seem really upset." And he just kept railing. "Well, why would you tell us that? And this is the dumbest thing." And I just turned to my left to my sister and said, "It's your turn." And my brother kept railing. And my sister went and took her turn, and then my mom, and then my sister-in-law took her turn. And my brother is not even close to calming down. And I said to him, "Tom, it's your turn." And he grumbled and he took his turn, and we went, and some other kind of conversation came up. Not 5 minutes later, a friend called, and we put the call on a cell phone in the center of the table, and we had this nice conversation. "Oh, how's the weather where you are, and how's this and that, and what's going on there?" And my brother jumps back into, "Oh, what is this happening? This happening? Tell me, this guy's dead, and he's going on and on about this dead guy." And nobody at our table said anything. And then there was silence. 3 hours later, this family member called me and said, "Hey, what was going on with your brother?" I said, "I don't know. He got really triggered to upset, and he wouldn't talk about what he was upset about, so I just quit talking about it." The next morning, we went to breakfast. This time my mother's not there. It's my sister and I sitting on one side of the booth, my brother and sister-in-law on the other side of the booth. We're having a nice conversation. And then in the middle of it, my brother starts up again. "Why would you tell us this guy is dead?" And I just looked at him and I said, "Tom, you seemed really upset about that yesterday, and you seem still upset about it today." And he started to say something else about me and why I would do this. And I just turned to my left to my sister and said, "Sue, how's work going?" So I refused to keep talking to him about the content. There were really good content answers to his question. But the point is, when his emotional intensity was so high, when he's sitting there believing I'm an idiot or I'm doing something hurtful to him, and he's raging about it, he won't be able to engage or evaluate whatever answer I provide. And I kept myself from engaging with sarcasm or, criticism of him for his blasting his anger. I acknowledged it. And if he would have said, "Yeah, I'm upset because," or, "I'm feeling scared or sad or hurt or offended," and we could have explored that, I would have engaged that conversation with him. But he just kept throwing his anger at me, how stupid it was that I would talk about something or some guy is dead. So we turned the conversation to my sister and talked about her work. My sister-in-law stayed quiet. My brother calmed down. The conversation went around to something else. About 10 minutes after that, my brother said in a calm, relaxed tone, he said, okay, okay, tell me that guy's name. I'll look into what he's doing. Out of nowhere. We hadn't gone back to talking about Dr. Sarno and his work. We hadn't talked about the upset that my brother clearly had from the day before. He just for something happened within him where his emotional intensity diffused to the point where he was able to say calmly, okay, I'll look into it. Would you please tell me his name? And then I just spelled out his last name for him and told him the title of one of his books and left it alone. It's it's one of the more powerful examples in my life of the benefit of refusing to talk about content or logistics or facts of matter when people are emotionally triggered to intense emotions, positive or negative. When the emotional intensity gets to be about a 6.5 or a 7 on a scale of 0 to 10, it doesn't matter whether it's a positive emotion or a negative emotion. It's going to be so intensely distorting to my perception that nothing good is going to come from continuing to hammer that topic or that conversation. So I am open to comments and questions. We had rather intense content yesterday, and if people are still carrying any kind of emotional intensity from that, we have the tools. We can step people through the worksheet. We can step people through EFT tapping. We can suggest mind shifters tools, and that's what we're here for. We're here to help people identify their levels of upset, explore their source within the individual, and apply tools to dismantle it. So if you're listening at live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio, thanks for being here. But if you're on the internet listening, it doesn't give you the option to type a comment or tap the phone icon to talk to us directly. You can download the Needle app from your app store. It's NEDL AI Tuner for Live Radio. Download the app, log in, answer a few questions, and we can have a conversation. Or you could type a comment if anything I'm saying is resonating or ringing a bell about your experience on the show yesterday or any of the comments that were flying back and forth. Please raise a hand or type a comment or ask for clarification about what I've been saying so far in today's show, the first 45 minutes. Or you can send me an email. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. I trying to turn on the microphone for Celinda. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. I've got this thing just about shoved down my mouth so you can hear. Um, I just having a comment in agreement to what you were saying. I remember I love quotes, so I open a book and I'll these quotes that I totally forgot, and and it may have been that or it may have been something you said, but I remember a comment that was made about Mother Teresa and how she was invited to an anti-war rally. And she said, no, thank you. If you have a peace rally, I'll be happy to come.
Exactly. We've talked about that a number of times on the show before, and that we encourage people to talk about from a calm, loving space what they are in favor of rather than what they are against, and to talk about and to focus on what is it that they can actively, proactively, purposely do in a positive sense to affect change in the direction they think would be preferable. And we had this situation come up in the second hour yesterday when Michael was talking to people about keeping the focus on healing yourself rather than the focus is I want to go out and heal the world. Well, if you want to heal the world, best place to do it is right inside your own mind, heart, and body energy system. And as the way of mastery and the Course in Miracles indicate to us, when we're healed, we're never healed alone. Way of Mastery says over and over again, all minds are joined. And if you think that you're living in that separated space, it's an optical delusion. So if all minds are joined, everything you do to dismantle your upset, your negativity, your hurt, your pain, your fear, and your sadness, it benefits everybody. Everybody, everywhere. Specifically and more intensely, there are those who would argue it happens more specifically and more intensely for your particular bloodline. But, I think that's just a way of rationalizing things. If there is any truth in what the Course in Miracles and Way of Mastery say, when you're healed, you are never healed alone, and millions yet unborn will benefit from the work you do here today. That's from the Course in Miracles. Or the Way of Mastery says, all minds are joined. There is no privacy the way you think of privacy. So,
Yeah, I like that very much. I especially like the your delineating content versus the emotional charge I might feel, process as you call it. And I love that one quote: "When we are healed, we are never healed alone." Thank you very much for both of those
well, you're very
reminders.
welcome. And the rest of the notes that I had from this thought process overnight and this morning go to the idea that anytime I throw a label on someone, I think of them as stupid, or I think of them as racist, or I think of them as, fill in the blank. I am I'm dehumanizing them. And as Guy Finley says, if I don't actively steal from myself every excuse to be negative, I will be able to rationalize any level of abuse.
Yes, that also. And when I think about when you said the comment about, well, it might be more intense for your bloodline, and I think about the saying that goes around there are only 6 degrees between each individual, and not even assuming, I'm intuiting that we all come from some common line, upline, and so how can we be that much different than anybody else, regardless of our bloodline?
Well, that does make sense. And whether it makes logical sense or not, as I mentioned, the proof is in the pudding, my grandmother would say. And so I will know if I've done enough worksheets on this because I will have changed the emotional response I have. I will have changed my perspective and my perception so that, as Michael Rice points out on a regular basis, worksheets to the point where when he looks back at the original situation, he wonders, what is it I was ever generating upset about? Right? When he's dismantled the false structures of belief and the distorted perceptions, sometimes minutes after he was in a rage about something, he has a hard time remembering what he was upset about at all. How did he look? He's looking at the same data points, but now he's not arranging them in a way that adds up to a good reason for him to be upset. And he's having a hard time remembering how he arranged those same data points in a way that generated upset in his mind just minutes before. And that's why the Way of Mastery talks about forgiveness as a process for dismantling my judgments and perceptions, and then opening myself to the greatest gift I could, which is the truth of life and the truth of the people. I keep using the phrase, these beings of brilliance and light that are standing in front of me. But I can't see the people and their truth as brilliance and light beings if I'm looking at them through my distorted perceptions, if I'm looking at them as just a person or just an idiot or just, a Republican or a Democrat or, somebody from some country that I dislike. As soon as I throw a label on someone, I have distorted my perception, and one of the more common results is I will have dehumanized them in my mind. And once they're no longer perceived by me as a fellow human being, a fellow spiritual being having a physical experience, then I can easily justify all kinds of negativity and abuse. So we're inviting people to catch that earlier and earlier in the process when they still have their logic online before they've gotten so thoroughly triggered that their logic goes offline, and to practice pouring more of my mental emotional energy into some part of my mind that can monitor me, monitor my mental and emotional states, and get better and better at identifying the earliest warning signs of upset. And then step into the use of tools as soon as I can when I've identified the upset, and the tools are used, as Guy Finley would say, to actively dismantle any excuse for being negative to myself or someone else.
A good reminder for us all, yes?
That's what we're hoping. That's why we're here, to pass along what's worked best for us in our lives.
Thank you
So,
so much.
any other comment or question from you?
Just, I thank every one of us for the service we give each other just by doing our own work and support, regardless of what we perceive in the moment. It's
All
really
right.
me when I remember, and thank you, sir.
All right. Well, I echo that and thank you for the call. Blessings. I will remind us all that there will be a support group tonight. It's a Tuesday, and so from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time, there will be the opportunity for you to join us or anybody that you think might benefit. You can point them to the mindshiftersacademy.org website, and there's a separate information for the login for Tuesdays and a separate one for Thursdays. And if you have internet and you go there and click on the Zoom link, you can join us for free. It's absolutely free, and the more the merrier. And today's a Tuesday, so the Tuesday group's been going for almost 21 years now, and the Thursday group is approaching its 12th year. And we'd love to have you join us. Also, please remember that Michael and Jeanie will start their second hour in a few minutes. We'll close down the app on my end and let them open it up on their end. And we hope you see fit to join them if that's in your schedule. And I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love. And